150 years, a mere blink of the eye in geologic time, but in terms of human achievement, a span that represents immense change.
The College of Arts and Sciences was the University of Washington.
When the University of Washington opened its doors in 1861, it began with the College of Arts and Sciences. Today, the college still serves as the foundation for much of what happens at the U. Arts and Sciences research continues to push the boundaries of our knowledge in new and exciting ways. Timeless Discoveries shines a light on some of the college's landmark achievements, past and present. Hello and welcome to a very special program, Timeless Discoveries, a celebration of 150 years of research and achievement here in the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm LeGate, and together we're going to explore discoveries both past and present that have helped put the university among the top 14 schools in the world. So let's begin with a trip back in time along a roadmap of excellence and learn about the essential core values that were established at the very beginning. Research, curiosity, innovation, discovery. Just a few words that describe what happens routinely here at the University of Washington. The school stands proudly as one of the world's leading institutions of higher learning.
It is now ranked as among the top 15 universities in the world. If you stop and think about that, for a state of 5 million people roughly, that is a remarkable achievement.
Chemistry professor and former vice provost for research, Alvin Quirham, is editor of 2 books showcasing 150 years of UW achievements. He explains why the school is so highly respected.
And the reason is because of its contributions to discovery over the years, which have had an impact worldwide on the lives of people in every walk of life.
So this is referred to as an alpha amino acid.
Those seeds of discovery and creativity were planted early on. The UW, which has grown to 3 campuses with a total student population of 48,000, emerged from rather simple beginnings.
The truth is that the College of Arts and Sciences was the University of Washington. We were the founding college. And so when the university started up, there was just us.
Over the years, the College of Arts and Sciences has grown dramatically and spun off many other colleges and disciplines. Resonating throughout all, though, is a culture of collaboration and the freedom to be curious.
The school that was based on what we think of as curiosity-based research. We weren't out to particularly commercialize a product or to, cure people. Yet we ended up spinning off all these other colleges that are doing very interesting things.
To understand how the college has evolved, it's necessary to look back in time. The year is 1861, the founding of what's known then as the Territorial University of Washington in downtown Seattle. In those early decades, the frontier university struggles, hampered by limited funding and little public support. Still, there is a commitment to seeking the best and brightest in terms of both students and faculty. The U is just a couple of decades old when it hires a pioneer scientist who will set the bar high.
They hired their first naturalist, and it was Orson Bennett Johnson, but he's referred to in their papers as Bug Johnson, which he brought his bugs with him.
Yes, Bug Johnson brings along his collection of some 20,000 biological specimens from Oregon. Soon he begins working with an amateur club that formed to collect and debate. They call themselves the Young Naturalist Society.
They didn't know what they were doing, but they liked the idea and they collected things. They collected bugs and fish and animals.
Julie Stein, executive director of the Burke Museum, says Johnson set rigorous new scientific standards for the young naturalists.
And he taught them how to collect and how to record very carefully the place you get the material, the time, the date, and to use scholarly resources to identify what it was. And they were identifying things that hadn't been collected before.
Johnson's discoveries help educate the outside world about the rich diversity of the Pacific Northwest, and his methods are often credited with establishing a legacy of excellence at the University of Washington. Today, Johnson Hall, named in his honor, guarantees that Bugg's contributions will not be forgotten. And his extensive collections, along with those of the Young Naturalist Society, eventually gave rise to the Washington State Museum, today known as the Burke.
If you walk through the museum, you will see many of the catalog numbers that say Young Naturalist on them. So they collected some of the most beautiful objects, and especially the cultural objects.
Today, the museum serves as an historical treasure trove for researchers at the University of Washington and all over the world.
We have no idea what will be useful for the scientists of 150 years from now. It is rather exciting and energizing to think that we have the responsibility of collecting just the right things that will be important to the future.
Somehow, the infant university spawned in backwater Seattle survives those early years. Then along come several events that stimulate growth. The Klondike Gold Rush of 1897 spikes the local population and jolts the state's economy. Then, in 1909, outsiders experience the vast natural resources of the Pacific Northwest thanks to a World's Fair known as the Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition. The AYP raises new buildings on the UW campus, which by now has moved to its current Seattle location. More big change comes years later, after World War II. That's when research at the university expands dramatically. The following decades are an exciting time.
Within our lifetime, basically, more discoveries have been made than have been made in the entire human history. And so that the store of human knowledge has just exploded in ways that are almost incomprehensible.
Discoveries at the University of Washington help catapult it to being a top recipient of federal research dollars. From the College of Arts and Sciences emerge many new schools and disciplines: computer science and engineering, architecture, medicine, the environment, and more. The UW earns international notoriety for many notable achievements, including the work of Hans Dehmelt, who in 1989 receives a Nobel Prize for his work in atomic physics. Evolution can be progressive, but just as in the natural world, it can also be a double-edged sword. While it's essential the university hang on to its origins, which means offering core subjects such as languages and math, it still has to compete in a rapidly changing world where new fields of study are being created, such as digital communications.
That's the kind of thing that we've been thinking a lot about the college, is trying to figure out how to be both timeless and timely.
And finding that balance is further complicated by shrinking budgets in tight economic times. The struggle for funds can certainly challenge that underlying commitment to curiosity-based research.
We don't want to change the kinds of research that our scientists, or that our social scientists, or that our humanists are carrying out. We want them to let their imaginations go unfettered.
Behind these walls, brilliant people are devoting countless hours to real-world problems. From disease prevention, to solar cell design, to scanning the universe. Just a few areas where the freedom to ask questions can translate into change for society.
Human curiosity tends to take us to important places that ends up having amazing payoffs that you could never be aware of ahead of time. And the thing about this university is you benefit from it, whether you come here or not. And often you don't know. You know that, your life has been changed, but you don't know who did it. You can't trace it. And that's okay. That's okay, but we feel really good about it.
There there are literally countless examples of how research done here in the College of Arts and Sciences have translated into solving real-world problems. Now, if this is a subject you'd like to explore a little bit more, just go to this website. It is artsci.washington.edu. Up next, meet two fascinating biologists who are great examples of very diverse studies within the same discipline. We humans are hardwired to try to improve the world around us. And here in the College of Arts and Sciences, it is scientific research that's the tool that helps feed that innate desire. Now, in the Department of Biology, there is one scientist who is trying to understand how nature solves difficult engineering problems, while another is taking a look both forward and backward in time through tiny grains of pollen. At the University of Washington, scientists agree that today's cutting-edge research is possible because of yesteryear's giants.
And had I ever met Trevor Kincaid, he would have scared me, he would have intimidated me.
Trevor Kincaid was a turn-of-the-century zoology professor at the U. He discovered dozens of new plant and animal species.
I come out of more of an engineering background, and I am always impressed by the biologists that know the biology of every living creature, plant and animal.
Tom Daniel, a UW biology professor, highly respects Kincaid's contributions, which include saving the state's dying oyster industry and creating the Friday Harbor Labs on San Juan Island. Daniel says Kincaid's trailblazing groundwork paved the way.
It was building an understanding of the natural world. And to this day, that's what we're still doing. We're trying to understand the natural world.
Today, Daniel is exploring the natural world in ways that Trevor Kincaid would find unimaginable. The Daniel Lab is trying to unravel nature's secrets of movement.
So I'm really interested in sensory motor control of living creatures, mostly insects.
High-speed photography helps analyze how moths navigate in flight. But that vastly oversimplifies what's going on here. Daniel's team has also created the technology needed to peer inside the moth's brain. Super thin probes which record how nerves react to all sorts of stimuli.
Rightish, leftish?
We're flying some moths in this wind tunnel, and ultimately we'll be testing different odors, introducing it into the wind tunnel and kind of mixtures of different odors and see how the moths respond.
I think one of the things that drives my research program is both understanding how nature has solved the problem of movement. It does it from molecules all the way up to whole moving creatures, and it's solved the sort of engineering problems of movement. So that really drives a lot of what I want to do, is just understanding how nature solved hard engineering problems.
His wings deteriorated a little bit as well.
Possible real-world applications of Tom Daniel's research seem restricted only by human imagination.
We're really interested in looking to nature to help us design new moving things, new robots, new interfaces to moving systems, new ways in which we might listen to a nervous system and control a robot or assist a human.
Heady stuff for sure, yet it's a team that blurs the boundaries between students and staff.
Hands-on, absolutely. Yep.
Did you notice if this was a male or a female, John?
Is it totally science fiction to think that you could have recording of a nervous signal of a human controlling a remote device? I can tell you, absolutely not science fiction. Absolutely doable today.
In a bit quieter setting, down the hall and through this door, one of biology's pioneers still reports for work every day.
Here's a nice little guy. This is a high altitude fur.
Estella Leopold is Professor Emeritus, a biologist who is one of the university's most esteemed environmentalists. A member of the National Academy of Sciences, she is devoted to the preservation and stewardship of natural places.
And these are spores. Aren't they pretty?
Dr. Leopold's expertise is pollen, the microscopic dust that plants spew into the air.
Pollen grains range from about 10 microns to 150 microns, which means that they are about 1,000th of an inch. They're very, very tiny.
Tiny, yes, but pollen grains provide huge insight into worlds long gone. Dr. Leopold's studies of ancient pollen deposits in southwest Washington, for example, show that the area was once subtropical.
This swamp area was much like the coast of Georgia, and then has endured, that area of course has endured climate change, and the mountains going up, everything changed in the last 6 million years.
One of Dr. Leopold's most notable environmental achievements was her crusade in Colorado to save a place called Florissant.
The fossils in Florissant are known worldwide to all the paleobotanists and paleontologists as being the most abundant fossils and the most intricately preserved fossils that we know of.
The Florissant would have been lost to development in the 1960s had it not been for Estella Leopold. After 5 years of fighting to preserve it, activists went to court. Just a few more months went by then before Congress acted, making the site a national monument.
Took about half a year, but it got it done.
Now Leopold is turning her attention to other issues, including one that affects the entire planet, global warming.
Of course, it isn't a belief, it's a fact.
Dr. Leopold is mapping the relationship between climate change and plant diversity. She has great concerns about how quickly our climate is changing.
Interesting thing about global warming today is that the rate of change, as we see it in, for example, in Lake Washington, is very different from what we had in the past. The most recent changes, as recorded since the 1950s, seem to be much faster than what we had going about 2 million years ago. So we're worried that the rate of climate change today, although it's similar to something we had just before the Ice Age, is much, much, much faster. And that's the concern.
The other concern for Dr. Leopold is how to engage today's youth in such matters. She acquired her passion for nature as a youngster, working the family farm in Wisconsin.
Falling in love with nature is the important element that we see lacking today.
Today she sees kids who are much more interested in their electronic gadgets than the natural world around them.
Who's going to preserve it if we don't have young people that are fond of nature? Who's going to fight for it? That's the problem.
From the earliest discoveries a century ago to analyzing ancient spores and measuring the most subtle of movements, University of Washington scientists are asking the questions and helping us better understand our complex world.
And that is a very special thing, is that really deep appreciation of the world that we're in, everything, the physical and biological, total natural world. There's something precious about understanding.
Estella Leopold says her biggest inspiration was her father, Aldo Leopold, who, by the way, is one of our country's most respected conservationists. He wrote a classic book called A Sand County Almanac. Now, as for Tom Daniel, he says that studying insects is allowing his team to explore technologies that actually interface machines with nervous systems. It's an emerging field known as neural prosthetics, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about this in the near future. Now stay with us, because up next, we'll tell you about the breakthrough discovery that gave the world the vaccine for hepatitis B. Hepatitis B is a highly contagious virus that has infected 2 billion people on our planet. Many people die of liver failure from hepatitis B. It can often live in the bloodstream for life. But many years ago, here at the University of Washington, came a game-changing development, a vaccine that can prevent this deadly disease. The freedom to do basic research, which seeks to understand fundamental principles or processes without knowing potential applications, is a core value of the University of Washington. Provost and former Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Anna Marie Kause.
human curiosity tends to take us to important places that ends up having amazing payoffs that you could never be aware of ahead of time.
In its 150-year history, scientists at the UW have contributed countless breakthrough discoveries that have reshaped life on planet Earth. Sometimes the answers come unexpectedly.
I think that, Ben Hall is a fabulous example of curiosity-based research.
When adults are exposed to the virus,
Benjamin Hall, molecular geneticist, professor emeritus in both the departments of biology and genome sciences. Dr. Hall joined the university faculty in 1963 and is undeniably the stuff of which academic legends are made. He is so revered, in fact, that a campus building bears his name.
that came as a great surprise. But that's very nice. I really appreciative of that recognition.
So why such a claim? Well, the story goes back to the early 80s. Ben Hall was doing basic research in yeast at the borderline between genetics and chemistry. He was seeking to identify the DNA signal that says a gene begins here. This research led to an unforeseen breakthrough, the ability to produce human proteins in yeast.
And it's proven to be far more useful than I ever thought it would be. There are quite a few different pharmaceutically important proteins that have been made in yeast.
This monumental discovery changed the lives of millions. It opened the door to the world's first genetically engineered vaccine, a vaccine for hepatitis B.
Over 90% of the countries in the world give this vaccine to babies right when they're born in the hospital.
Having people like Ben Hall at the University of Washington has made an enormous difference.
Ron Howell is CEO of the Washington Research Foundation. This is where discoveries such as Ben Hall's find the marketplace. WRF applies for patents on intellectual property and brokers licensing agreements.
His technology, which has been licensed to at least 80 companies, has had an impact because the money that has been returned to the university has supported scholarships for undergraduate students, has supported fellowships for graduate students, has supported gift programs and endowments and professorships. So it's huge. It can't be, I don't think it can be overstated.
What Ben Hall did is important for all aspects of biochemical, molecular biology, and medical sciences.
Chemistry professor Michael Gelb gives Ben Hall credit for inspiring his own life-saving research at the U. Gelb's work also intersects with medicine.
There's a number of rare genetic diseases where people are missing a key enzyme involved in metabolism. There's a whole bunch of these diseases, thousands, unfortunately.
These rare metabolic diseases can have crippling and sometimes fatal consequences, so early detection is essential.
If only you had known that the baby had one of these treatable diseases, you could have started treatment early in life.
I will fix that 7.4 pH.
It was Michael Gelb who found a way to expand infant health screening to detect some of these diseases. His technology is used worldwide now.
Feels good to work on, things that are translated to the real world of medicine.
Not one to rest on his laurels, Ben Hall still loves the laboratory.
Caucasicum from the Caucasus.
He's now focusing on a long-time passion, the rhododendron. Hall is sequencing the genome, hoping to learn more about the plant's origins.
And I was going to add some more footnotes here to describe why these are different.
And yet another aspect of Dr. Hall's legacy, the caliber of students he draws and the experiences they gain working with him.
I had no idea quite how prestigious he was until I began working here, and some of my other friends and colleagues were like, "Oh, you work in Dr. Hall's lab?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, I do."
Even after all these years, Ben Hall sometimes finds it hard to truly comprehend how his discovery prevented so much human suffering.
It's a sobering thought. I might have done something entirely different, but just having, for various reasons, decided to do this did have consequences. Unexpected consequences.
It seems like our imagination takes us places that have payoffs. And I think that investing in the human imagination, investing in curiosity, is one of the best investments you could make.
Dr. Hall has chosen to help many other people with the income generated from his patent. And recently, he and his wife created a new graduate fellowship for international students in the Department of Biology. Now, as for Dr. Gelb, another one of his current research interests is finding drugs to fight malaria. And his many biomedical contributions have won numerous awards. And speaking of malaria, a little later we'll meet a UW chemist who is attacking malaria on several fronts. But first, a stellar professor who has played a key role in the success of the Hubble Space Telescope. The mission of the College of Arts and Sciences is twofold: to be both timely and timeless, to educate and push forward the frontiers of knowledge. From the tiniest microbes to the most enormous galaxies, researchers in the college are trying to unlock the secrets of the universe all around us. But perhaps the most remote frontier of all is the one at the edge of time itself.
We are of the cosmos. The universe is the size that it is. And we live in a sliver of it, and our view of the cosmos is just so narrow, so narrow.
Dr. Bruce Ballack's mission is to widen our narrow view.
From beginning to end, it's about basic research and trying to make sense of the universe in which we live.
Ballack has been professor of astronomy at the University of Washington for 35 years. He's a true stargazer, a scientist working to unlock secrets millions of light years away.
All of astronomy is devoted to making sense out of the things that we see, and so much of what we see in the sky isn't predicted or replicated here on the surface of the planet.
That's why tools such as the Hubble Space Telescope are so critical. Dr. Ballack worked for 12 years to help design the Hubble's newest camera.
And the camera's just been a screaming success. It went up in May 2009. I was here.
Booster ignition and liftoff.
And right from the very outset, that camera began returning brand new science. It had a suite of filters that extended its scientific range. Instead of just working in the visible part of the spectrum, which we see, it also works in the infrared and the ultraviolet. And these were largely new frontiers for Hubble.
An especially memorable image was the one known as Hubble Deep Field. Astronomers pointed the telescope at a dark, seemingly empty spot in the far reaches of outer space.
And we aimed Hubble and exposed for 4 straight days. The light just barely trickled in. And when the image came out, we had peered further into the universe than we had ever done before. We peered about 10 billion light years from here.
The image was stunning. Thousands of ancient galaxies.
For the first time, seeing the universe just as it evolves out of infancy.
Dr. Ballack has been an official observer of Hubble photos for 2 decades. Exciting work, but also a job that comes with inescapable gravity.
I am just like anybody else. I sit there with my mouth agape saying, this is just absolutely bizarre, it's wonderful. The difference between me and many of the other people who see these images is that 10 seconds later reality hits and I realize I'm responsible to figure out what's going on in these images. I mean, the Hubble isn't there just to take pretty pictures, it's there to probe the way in which the universe behaves.
No doubt, astronomers of yesteryear would have been amazed by these photos. The first observatory was built at UW way back in 1895.
There had been astronomers at the University of Washington since the very beginning.
The Department of Astronomy was officially created in the College of Arts and Sciences in 1965. The program is now recognized nationally for its outstanding resources and faculty.
The department here is very much research oriented, so they love to throw research at undergrads and have them get their hands dirty with it.
We're a research university loaded with opportunities for every student. One place or another, our students should be engaging in scholarship or research before they leave. It's exciting. It's what propels you forward into graduate school.
I go to the observatory on North Campus, the old observatory, and I do outreach there for general public.
Thomas Gomez and other undergrads are responsible for hosting the public shows at the old observatory. Balak says it's important that a taxpayer-funded institution gives back.
And it's also part of community building, right? The networking, the reaching out, which is such an important part of what any good university has to do.
It is a mystical and humbling experience to gaze skyward and wonder, to marvel at the enormity of it all. Bruce Balak describes recent decades as a Renaissance period of sorts, where human knowledge is expanding faster than the universe after the Big Bang. And he is thrilled his research helps us look up, ponder, and understand.
This is really a wonderful time. And for me to have been here at the university through 35 years of this golden age has been a privilege. That's the nature of science, right? There is no end to the learning.
Dr. Balak tells us his main area of research right now is trying to decipher how certain elements such as hydrogen and helium are produced in the stars. Now you can do your own stargazing right here on campus. Just come over to the Jacobson Observatory. It is open to the public a couple of times a month. All the details are right there at that website on the lower third of your screen. Still to come, meet a researcher hoping to save lives by outsmarting an infectious killer of millions every year. Malaria is a deadly disease that is believed to have arrived on planet Earth even before humanity. Even though it's no longer seen in the United States, it is a disease that should not be forgotten. For years here at the university, a dedicated chemist and his team have been working toward a timeless discovery in the hopes of conquering malaria once and for all. Malaria is a deadly disease that kills around 1 million people every year on this planet. Most of the victims are children. Many live in Africa.
I grew up in Africa. My parents moved there as young people in Tanzania, and I was born in Dar es Salaam. And there was malaria all around us.
Living in Africa shaped Pradeep Rathod's interest in health and medicine. He also gained personal understanding of a disease he's been working decades to eliminate.
I first started working on malaria parasites in 1981. So this is referred to as an alpha amino acid.
A chemistry professor at the University of Washington, Pradeep and his team are working hard to defeat malaria from several angles.
What are the yields? What kind of yields are you getting? Like 50%. We really are basic scientists. We care a lot about the disease. We ask questions that many have not asked before. We like to think our questions will lead to avoidance of the disease or better treatment or early diagnosis.
While the research tools and technology have improved immensely, the various malaria strains remain elusive, one step ahead, constantly adapting.
Today, malaria is probably as bad as it's ever been. These parasites really make their living by changing. We now know that these parasites can do things that will make us rewrite textbooks about biology and genetic changes.
Malaria is a blood-borne illness carried by mosquitoes. One bite infects a person with dozens of malaria protozoa. They circulate throughout the bloodstream and end up in the liver. At this point, the disease still doesn't cause any symptoms.
When those parasites burst out of the liver, then they start invading red blood cells. Every parasite that hits a red cell will make 24, 36, 48 copies of itself every 2 days.
And that's what makes people so sick. Fatigue, fever, chills, in some cases coma, and even death. That's a tough thing to witness, but Pradeep knows it's necessary to push beyond the test tube.
In order to be contributors to this process, we need to be doing our science in the field.
So members of the Rathod team have traveled to Africa and India several times to further their research.
So we went to India, a few people from the lab, as well as Pradeep. We were there to meet people that we were going to be collaborating with and travel around to see the different sites that we could potentially set up labs.
And it's definitely an eye-opener, to say the least. I mean, to see little kids, that cannot move or are in a coma in hospitals is really, it highlights the importance of some of the stuff that we're doing in the laboratory.
I'd like to think I know as much as most people about malaria, but when you're in that room, in that clinic, and the person is extremely sick, the family is gathered around, you have so much respect for the physicians who are working with those patients. They try their best with the resources they have. They're trying their best with the knowledge that they have. And they're well aware that often it's not enough. And the amount of hope that you see from the patients and from the family looking at the doctors, and in some cases looking at us as visitors, hoping that we have something that might help them that day for their patient, it's extremely humbling and sometimes difficult.
Pradeep and his team will soon return to India on a 7-year grant from the National Institutes of Health. Their research will contribute to a global malaria study.
Beyond India, there are friends and partners who have such grants to work in 3 different parts of Africa. They have Central America, they have Amazonia covered, they have Southeast Asia, they have the islands near Papua New Guinea. So we will all be comparing notes over these 7 years, and we hope the University of Washington team will have useful things to teach to our colleagues who work all over the world.
Years ago, Pradeep Rathod decided he could not turn his back on a disease he left behind in his country of birth. He's aiming high, the goal challenging. But it's his kind of determination, intellect, and compassion that will help us one day realize a malaria-free world.
People around the world are suffering in ways that stopped happening in the Western world decades ago. And so there's a need for setting our aims high. And I would love to be part of this larger teams of people that actually help eliminate malaria where it's still a very large problem.
Since our interview, Pradeep has been back to both Africa and to India and will return to Northeast India soon to continue working on his NIH grant. Meantime, he says he really does love working in Seattle, calling it a very collaborative city because there are so many global health organizations located here. Stay tuned. Up next, we have some incredible critter stories for you and the researchers who are changing international policy. Who doesn't love a good animal story? And in this case, we have 2 for you. And behind the research are a couple of the university's most intriguing scientists. Now, one is collecting a vast amount of information using highly trained dogs, while the other is doing her best to save one of the most adorable creatures to ever walk the face of the planet. What do penguins and poop have in common? Both are the focus of fascinating long-term studies at the University of Washington. And the resulting science is changing policy on a global scale. First, let's talk birds. 40 years ago, these charming creatures became the obsession of biology professor Dee Boersma.
I fell in love with penguins, and I've been studying them ever since.
Dr. Boersma is passionate about saving penguins. Half the world's species are now endangered. She says their collapsing populations are delivering a warning about the planet's health.
They're really good reflectors, good sentinels of what's happening in the marine environment.
Boersma has had the rare opportunity to study one type of penguin for nearly 3 decades.
We've been working on Magellanica penguins in Argentina for 28 years. That's a real luxury. Most grants are for 2 years, maybe 3 years, occasionally a 4 or 5 year grant, but those are really rare.
Over the years, Dee's research in South America has documented thousands of oil-covered penguins coming ashore.
We estimated that there were about 61,000 penguins that were being oiled every year during their migration. So what do you do about that? And what we finally got the government to realize is, first of all, you got to stop the illegal dumping. We convinced them with 8 years of data that this was a chronic problem, and now they've moved the tanker lanes 40 kilometers further offshore, and there's much less illegal dumping of oily ballast water. So there are a lot of problems that people can solve. It's about 1.5 meters back. She's got 2 eggs.
Boersma believes that humans will make change if we understand the cost of our consumption.
None of this is for free, and we have to make choices about how our world's going to look and what we're going to do, what we know, how we act, and all of that takes education.
And a favorite educational tool is Conservation Magazine.
Hi, I'm Dee Boersma. I'm here at Punta Tumble, Argentina.
Dee is co-founder and executive editor of this award-winning quarterly, published at the UW.
And Conservation is a publication that routinely exceeds our expectations.
Writing, researching, advising students all serve Dee Boersma's mission to preserve biodiversity and ensure a future for the planet's flightless birds.
We can change the world one person at a time. In the end, that will save the penguins. If people pay attention to what they do, yeah, it will change the world.
Come here, sweetie.
Dr. Samuel Wasser is another UW professor changing international policy. He's a research biologist and director of the Center for Conservation Biology.
Well, everything that we do in our center starts with feces, believe it or not.
While that may not sound so glamorous, poop produces a gold mine of information.
We can get the DNA, tell its species, its sex, its individual identity, and we can get all these physiological measures. We can tell if it's stressed, if it's nutritionally impaired, if it's reproductive or not, and we can get toxins from the sample, and we can do all that without seeing the animal at all.
All right, ready to find it? Oh, all right, let's go.
And then you couple that with dogs that can collect huge numbers of samples over large landscapes, and you have a tool like none other.
Wasser launched Conservation Canines in 1997. The program now sends scat-sniffing dogs all over the world.
We first started out working on grizzly bears and black bears. Actually, in Washington State, we found the first grizzly bear ever found in the Cascades. The smallest animal we study is the Pacific pocket mouse in Southern California, which is the size of a golf ball, and its feces is the size of a sesame seed. The dogs have done animals as big as right whales and killer whales.
And Tucker is the one who specializes in killer whale waste. Pretty amazing for a dog that doesn't like water.
We picked Tucker because Tucker hates the water. He's hysterical about it.
He's got a scent.
Tucker will work tirelessly for a certain reward, playing with his ball. It's a trait essential to all these tracking specialists.
Almost all of our dogs are rescued from the pound. You have to have a dog that has an insane play drive. I mean, just over the top.
Tucker is a valuable helper in the quest to save a local endangered species. Wasser's reputation, however, as a conservation crusader goes far beyond the Northwest.
You ready? Okay, come on, find it.
In Alberta, Canada, when caribou were rapidly declining, Sam's dogs proved it wasn't wolves preying upon them, but human use of roads that interrupted their feeding. The findings helped quiet the call to destroy the wolves. And Wasser's team has genetically mapped elephant populations all across Africa using DNA from scat. His science is being used to fight the illegal ivory trade by matching DNA from poached tusks to this map.
The illegal wildlife trade in general right now is, in some accounts, a $20 billion a year industry. And it's really destroying the planet. My laboratory is the only lab in the world that is able to actually take a piece of ivory, genotype it, and tell you exactly where it came from in Africa.
Several years ago, when a huge shipment of ivory was seized in Asia, the Wasser lab was able to trace the tusk's DNA to one place, Tanzania.
What that means is once we identify a hotspot, we can actually send law enforcement in there and catch them in the act. So we can actually stop the elephants from being killed in the first place. No one else can do that.
Plus, his research also convinced Tanzanian officials not to lower the protection status of their elephants. That would have allowed the country to sell their ivory stockpiles, which Wasser opposes, believing it helps keep the ivory trade alive. Sam Wasser's pioneering work is providing unique insights into species on the brink. Both he and Dee Boersma are affecting big change, building public awareness, and altering international policies. No small contributions to preserving life on a diverse and beautiful planet. Most recently, conservation canines are in the Gulf Coast working with the Coast Guard to try to locate sea turtle eggs in the sand. And Tucker and company returned just recently from another successful season up in the San Juan Islands. Sam Wasser tells me that all the data that they're collecting up there points to one thing, that the orcas simply don't have enough food to eat. Now, if you want to read up on conservation issues, Dee Boersma would love to have you subscribe to her magazine. It is conservationmagazine.org to order your subscription. Now don't go away. Still to come, a fantastic journey through the human brain with iLabs. As we've seen, scientists here in the College of Arts and Sciences are conducting research in a variety of exciting areas. Everything from curing deadly diseases to capturing images of supernovas millions of light years away. But perhaps no area holds more fascination than the study of the organ responsible for it all, the human brain. The human brain, a complex organ we are just beginning to understand. Many breakthrough discoveries, though, are coming from the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences.
People around the world are beginning to look at the University of Washington for cutting-edge knowledge about early learning in the brain. It's very, very exciting.
It's a totally new world, a new frontier.
Doctors Patricia Kuhl and Andrew Meltzoff are co-founders and co-directors of iLabs. They head up a talented interdisciplinary research team.
We are psychologists and speech and hearing scientists, and we're collaborating with engineers, with radiologists from the medical school, with computer scientists, with speech and hearing sciences, with linguistics, with many departments on campus who are interested in humans' abilities to learn.
When I started, early learning was sometimes connected to home ec departments. It was a kind of low prestige job. But now everybody understands that early learning and brain development is like rocket science.
With a mean of 7 and a mean of 11.
Research coming out of iLabs is rewriting the science about how humans learn, especially young children.
We think that children learn more in the first 5 years than they will in any other 5-year period in their lifetimes.
After a decade of planning, iLabs recently acquired a phenomenal new tool. This is an MEG machine, one of the few in the world.
This room houses magnetoencephalography, which is a machine that looks like a giant hairdryer from Mars. It picks up the minute magnetic fields that are changing as the brain does its work. And so the recording of those magnetic field changes tell us with millisecond precision and millimeter precision where in the brain the activity is taking place and how the various areas of the brain are talking to one another.
Waves on a computer screen show what the brain is actually doing when a child learns their first word or recognizes a parent.
And you can see that is where the brain's energy is focused at that moment. That's where the cellular firing is really, really high.
The new brain tools allow us, in a sense, to get underneath the hood and look at the neural mechanisms that underlie behavior.
Yeah? And behavioral studies are also essential at iLabs. These are just a few of the kids who've participated in recent experiments.
He likes coming here.
The subjects have fun, while the parents gain knowledge.
Horses like to run and jump.
I've learned sometimes that my children are more capable of things than I thought they were.
Wow, where'd they go?
Because they don't speak with us, it's difficult for us to conceive how much they're actually learning. But through the research here, I've seen that obviously children are learning much more before we even understand what they're doing. So I think that's been my major appreciation.
In landmark studies, iLabs has shown that babies can imitate adult behaviors just hours after birth. It's the human connection that is so critical.
What we have found in our research is that babies learn first and best from other human beings. Human beings and parents are the baby's first and best teachers.
To help improve the lives of children, iLab's goal is to share their findings as soon as possible. The team has testified at congressional hearings and been visited by various international and local dignitaries.
I really think that the University of Washington is a wonderful place to make discoveries and to work together. It values basic research, it's good at basic research, and because of the philanthropy that goes on here, the community, our very informed legislature, I really think we've had a perfect setting in which to do the research and great leaders.
As research moves forward, iLabs will continue leading the way, revealing more mysteries of the brain. Yet the scientists here believe one conclusion will remain: the importance of connecting to our children, and as early as day one.
We are born social. We are born learning. It begins at birth, and we are connected to others.
iLab researchers are always on the cutting edge of brain research, and in fact, one of the experiments they want to do in the near future is to hook up an infant and a mother to brain scanning devices at the same time and watch how their brains interact with each other. Don't go away. You ever wonder what will happen when fossil fuels run out? You'll meet a UW scientist working on a solution. We've heard it over and over again. There is only so much oil in the ground, yet we're so far away from solving our energy crisis. Thankfully, though, a brilliant team of chemists, engineers, and others have been working on this problem for years here at the UW, and their goal is to tap into the most reliable energy source of all, the sun.
I think it's the most important problem facing our society today.
What has taken Mother Nature hundreds of millions of years to create, we have basically burned up in 100 years. We have squandered a fixed resource, namely the fossil fuels.
UW chemist David Ginger and retired chemistry professor Alvin Quirum agree that the greatest challenge of this generation is finding renewable energy sources.
We get 80% of our energy from fossil fuels right now, and if you want to go to a completely renewable energy supply, that would mean replacing 80% of our primary energy over the next few decades.
Ginger's goal is to harness the sun. Silicon solar cells have been around since the 50s, but they're expensive.
So how can we make solar energy cheaper?
One way is to use cheaper materials. Ginger's team is working on organic or plastic solar cells.
That's a solar cell. It totally works.
So all of the plastic solar cells that are made today are made by blending two different organic semiconductors together. These are two different materials that absorb light and conduct electricity.
There are infinite ways to mix the materials, so the key is to find the right combination that's both efficient and durable.
So right now, making plastic solar cells is largely an art as much as it is a science.
We saw the VOCs of 0.4 volts or something.
A project this complex requires a highly skilled team from a variety of disciplines.
It spans every discipline from chemistry to chemical engineering, material science to electrical engineering. There are colleagues in all the departments across campus that we're partnering with.
Dr. Ginger explains that discoveries come with commitment to basic research, a practice established long ago in arts and sciences. Answers do not arrive overnight.
We want to fix everything tomorrow. And this problem didn't crop up overnight, and this problem is not going to go away overnight. And we need to be investing in the basic science that will lead to unexpected discoveries to solve our problems in the coming decades. And we need to be training the next generation of students.
And I put a drop of solution on and it spins.
I feel pretty passionate about alternative energy and how important it is. And I love the idea of doing research to make cheaper solar cells, things that people could actually afford. It's interesting, it's maybe useful, and it's fun.
The Ginger Group is among the best in the nation working on organic solar cells. A breakthrough could come any time, or perhaps years from now.
The vision is if we can make these materials efficient enough and stable enough that they can live for decades on your roof, that you could transform the economics of solar photovoltaics and have electricity generated from sunlight be cheaper than electricity that you would get from a coal-fired power plant.
Solving energy problems will undoubtedly be one more legacy contributed by scientists at the University of Washington. It is virtually impossible to summarize 150 years of achievement, from the earliest pioneers who first identified new species to today's great minds working to cure disease, to save the Earth's wild places and animals, and others who are studying nature's design, brain development, and galaxies far, far away.
You got the samples from Harvard, right?
There are innumerable timeless discoveries already in the history books, yet many more still to come. As long as curiosity runs free, there will be endless questions to ask.
They're all going to be addressed by research, by discovery, by having creative minds, young kids, graduate students, undergraduates, investing their time and energy and intelligence and creativity to bring resolution to many of these challenging issues.
I really think that this university is a place of transformative experiences.
They do this warm-up flight where they start to beat their wings.
We are really just about the only place in society, the only place in the world where we have the luxury and responsibility to be thinking about moving research forward that in fact may not have a payoff for 20 years or maybe even 50 years.
It's a fantastic time to have been a part of it and to be alive, to have seen the incredible research that has developed, the explosion of knowledge, the kind of deep understanding one can gain. It's incredibly exciting.
Well, that wraps up our special Timeless Discoveries. We really hope you've enjoyed watching. And by the way, all the scientists we've profiled here have individual websites where you can go and learn more about what they're up to these days. Those links are at this website, artsci.washington.edu. On behalf of everyone in the College of Arts and Sciences, I'm Penny LeGate. Thanks for watching.